Right now, as you watch this, the Strait of Hormuz is partially open under a ceasefire that nobody fully trusts. Iran has suspended talks with the countries trying to arrange a peace deal. America says negotiations are still going. A draft agreement that could end the war is sitting on the table unsigned. It needs approval from a man who has not been seen in public since the very first day the fighting started. His name is Mojtaba Khamenei. His father was killed in the opening hours of the war. Every news channel is telling you that this war is about nuclear weapons, about missiles, about who rules Iran. Here's what almost none of them are telling you. In a flat in Tehran, an economics student is watching the peace talks on his phone. His grandfather worked at the world's largest oil refinery, and in 1953, that grandfather watched his country's elected prime minister removed from power by a foreign intelligence service in broad daylight for a reason that had nothing to do with security. The chain from that morning runs directly to the war you are watching right now. Here's exactly what that chain looks like. Why did America destroy the one Iranian government that actually wanted to work with the West? How does a decision made in a safe house in Tehran in 1953 connect directly to the killing of Iran's supreme leader today? And why, after more than 70 years, is the chain from one August morning still driving the headlines you are reading right now? Those three questions have only one answer. To understand what is happening today, you need to go back to 1901. It is the beginning of the 20th century. Beneath Iran's deserts lies one of the richest oil deposits on Earth. A British businessman named William Knox Darcy signs a deal with the Iranian Shah. Britain gets the exclusive right to find, drill, and sell Iran's oil for the next 60 years. Iran's cut 16% of the profits. Britain keeps the other 84%. Oil is found in large quantities in 1908. The British government immediately buys a controlling share in what becomes the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, known today as BP. Its main purpose is simple: fuel the Royal Navy. By the 1940s, the company is pulling 30 million tons of Iranian oil out of the ground every year. Now look at the numbers from 1947. The company makes 40 million pounds in profits after taxes. Iran receives 7 million pounds. That is 17.5% of the profits from its own oil on its own soil. At the same time, the British government collects 16.8 million pounds in taxes from the same company. More money goes to the British treasury that year than to the Iranian people. In the oil city of Abadan, the site of the largest oil refinery in the world, British engineers and managers live in houses with running water, air conditioning, private schools, and neat gardens. Half a kilometer away, the grandfather of the economics student watching the peace talks today earns 50 cents a day in a shantytown the Iranians themselves call Kagazabad, which means paper city. No electricity, no clean water, surrounded by mud. The two communities sit 500 meters apart. Every morning, workers from Kagazabad walk past the British compound to reach the refinery. The difference between the two worlds is total. It is not something that can be explained away. It is humiliation visible every single day. By 1950, one idea has swept the entire country. This oil belongs to us. Out of that feeling rises Mohammad Mossadegh. He is 69 years old, educated in Europe, a lawyer and a landowner. He is not a communist. He is not an extremist. He believes in elections, courts, and the rule of law. In 1951, the Iranian parliament votes him in as prime minister by a landslide. His platform has one main promise: take back control of Iran's oil from Britain. In April 1951, Mossadegh stands in front of parliament and announces that Iran is nationalizing the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. Both houses vote unanimously. From that point forward, Iran's oil belongs to Iran. London reacts immediately. Winston Churchill calls it theft. The Royal Navy moves warships close to Iranian ports. Britain freezes Iran's money in British banks. It blocks the sale of key goods to Iran, and it organizes a worldwide boycott of Iranian oil, threatening any country or company that tries to buy it. Within 18 months, Iran's oil income drops from $400 million a year to almost nothing. Tens of thousands of workers lose their jobs at Abadan. Mossadegh refuses to back down. He takes Iran's case to the International Court of Justice, the highest court in the world. In July 1952, the court rules in Iran's favor. Iran has the right to its own oil. For London, this is a humiliation, and when great powers are humiliated, they look for a way to fight back. Britain goes to Washington. The argument British officials give the new Eisenhower government is not about oil. It is about communism. A British intelligence officer named Monty Woodhouse admitted this openly in his own memoirs. He wrote, "Not wishing to be accused of trying to use the Americans to pull British chestnuts out of the fire, I decided to emphasize the communist threat to Iran." In other words, they lied. They told Washington that Mossadegh was soft on communism, that Iran could fall to the Soviets. None of it was true. Mossadegh had spent his entire career pushing back against Soviet influence in Iran, but in the early years of the Cold War, the word communist was enough to end any conversation. Washington agrees to act. The CIA's own internal documents, released to the public decades later, state exactly what happened. The coup was carried out under CIA direction as an act of US foreign policy. Not a mistake, not a rogue mission, a decision made at the highest levels of the American government. Operation Ajax is born. Before the operation begins, here's the one detail that reframes everything you just heard. Mossadegh had directly asked the United States for help against British pressure. He believed America was different from Britain. He thought Washington would support Iran's right to own its own oil. He reached out personally. America chose Britain's oil instead. A CIA officer named Kermit Roosevelt Jr., the grandson of President Theodore Roosevelt, arrives in Tehran in July 1953. The CIA has set aside $1 million for the operation, roughly $12 million in today's money. His job? Remove Mossadegh, put the Shah back in power, and return Iran's oil to Western hands. What follows is not a military operation, it is a psychological one. Editors at Iranian newspapers are paid to publish false stories about Mossadegh. Politicians are bribed to abandon him in parliament. Religious leaders are paid to turn their followers against him in their sermons. Hired crowds are told to dress as Mossadegh supporters, then go out and cause violence in his name to make it look like chaos is coming from his side. The first attempt fails. The Shah panics and flees the country. It looks as though Mossadegh has survived, but Roosevelt does not stop. 4 days later, on August 19, 1953, the second attempt succeeds. Around 300 people are killed in the streets of Tehran. Mossadegh is arrested and put on trial for treason. He is found guilty. He spends the rest of his life under house arrest and dies there, in 1967, having never been allowed to leave. The Shah comes back. Within a year, a new oil deal is signed, the 1954 Consortium Agreement. British Petroleum gets 40% of Iranian oil. 5 American companies share another 40% between them. A Dutch and a French company take what is left. Iran gets 50% on paper, but has no say over how much oil is taken, what price it sells for, or where it goes. The grandfather in Kakazabad still earns 50 cents a day. To stay in power, the Shah creates SAVAK, a secret police force trained directly by the CIA. Anyone who speaks up against the government is arrested. Newspapers are shut down. Political parties are banned. By the end of the 1950s, there is no legal way to oppose the government in Iran. That is what 1953 creates. It does not explode immediately, it builds pressure for 26 years. The bill comes due in 1979. Ayatollah Khomeini returns from 14 years of exile. Millions of Iranians fill the streets. The Shah is forced to flee the country. And on the 4th of November, a group of Iranian students storms the US Embassy in Tehran and holds 66 people hostage for 444 days. When those students are asked why they did it, their answer is recorded in the National Security Archive. They were afraid of a second 1953. They believed the United States was planning to bring the Shah back, exactly the way it had brought him back once before. That fear drove everything that came next. Washington cuts off all relations with Iran. Sanctions begin. The US government freezes over $8 billion in Iranian assets overnight. Over the following decades, those sanctions grow wider and harder. Iran builds a nuclear program as a deterrent, as protection against a world that has already removed its government once. The nuclear program brings even more sanctions. The economy contracts, the currency collapses, and the pressure builds until it reaches the strikes that started the war you are watching today. In February 2026, the United States and Israel launched the biggest coordinated attack in the history of the Middle East. Iran's supreme leader was killed on the very first day. His son took the position. The Strait of Hormuz was closed days later. The chain runs without a break. 1901 to 1953 to 1979 to today. Every single link made possible by the one before it. Here's what the chain has cost, in numbers that anyone can check. Before 1979, Iran's economy grew at 9.1% a year. Since then, it has averaged just 1.9%. The Iranian rial was worth about 70 to the US dollar before the revolution. It has since fallen to over 1 million rials per dollar. Between 2012 and 2024, the average Iranian's yearly income dropped from $8,000 to $5,000. Over 12 years of heavy sanctions, Iran lost an estimated $1.2 trillion in total economic output. The current war has added more. Oil prices peaked above $120 per barrel. Petrol prices in the United States topped $4 a gallon. The International Energy Agency has called this the biggest disruption to global oil supply in the entire history of the oil market, 2 to 3 times worse than the 1973 oil shock. Right now, a peace agreement that would fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz is being negotiated but has not been signed. The man who needs to approve it on Iran's side has not been seen in public since the day the war began. In Tehran, the grandson of the Abadan refinery worker watches those negotiations on his phone. The same phone that cost more than his grandfather earned in a month. The talks he is watching today are the direct result of a chain his grandfather lived inside. Nothing about this is accidental, all of it has a history. Here's the question that keeps coming back again and again. If the 1953 coup had never happened, if Mossadegh had been left in power, do you think Iran and America would be at war today, or does the oil always end up in the same hands? Britain kept its oil. America kept its ally. Iran lost its democracy. And more than 70 years later, the world is still paying that bill. This story is not over. The ceasefire holding right now may not hold for long. Every sanctions deal, every nuclear negotiation, every conflict Iran has been involved in for the last 4 decades carries the logic of one decision made in a safe house in Tehran in August 1953. That is what this channel is here to show you. The chains that run beneath the headlines, the decisions made in rooms you never heard of, and the costs paid by people who had no say in any of it. Subscribe. That is what the Meridian Ledger is for. Every crisis has a history. Every history has a ledger. This has been the Meridian Ledger.